Okay, so Infinidat, I think you've been pretty busy since I spoke to the CEO. I think that was about June or certainly early spring. And most obviously, you have launched, I think, the InfiniBox SSA. So perhaps
Yes.
we could start with a bit of a sort of high-level view of what that is, why you've introduced it.
Sure, great question. Actually, I'll take the second question first. Why did we launch it? Customer feedback, and that's sort of the best reason to ever create a product or launch a product. A lot of our larger customers had said to us, we love InfiniBox. It's great, it's fabulous. We love the performance, we love the availability, the ease of use, all of that. But occasionally we have some ultra high performance applications, probably no more than maybe at most 5% of what we ever encounter, where in addition to guaranteeing low latency for the average of every IO, we would love for our own competitive advantage to be able to say, every single IO is going to be super low latency, ultra low latency, not only lower than a millisecond, maybe even lower than half a millisecond all the time, or pretty much all the time. And they said, if you build something like that, we can use it for competitive advantage. Because these days, since everybody does almost everything on the web, or their presence is visible on the web, not only do your own employees know if something wasn't up to snuff in performance, but the whole world often knows. And if somebody is able to deliver a better service than you are, that's a problem. So a lot of these organizations said, if you can guarantee us effectively a product that can get us ultra low latency all the time, we see that as getting competitive advantage for our organization. And if you build it, we will come. So we thought about it, and we realized that with our architecture, it lended itself to very simply being able to adapt to that. We've been able to use DRAM caching with our neural cache software on the front end of traditional InfiniBox for years to be able to get ultra low latency, and where typically our customers are able to get maybe 90% or higher of their individual IOs delivered at DRAM speeds, which is an order of magnitude faster than flash. But these customers were saying, hey, for a few of these applications, we even want to get to that single digit, that last 10%. We want all of them to be super low latency. And that's what drove us. So the product itself is actually very simple. Where on traditional InfiniBox, we had conventional nearline SAS disks, very high capacity, very low cost, very reliable on the back end. We simply take those out and we replace them with conventional industry open solid state disks. It's still the same software, it's still the same architecture, it's still all the feature and function, it's still the DRAM caching in front for 100% of the writes, and even still for delivering reads, it's still going to intelligently figure out what to stage into cache from the back end. The net effect of all of this has proven itself to be a level of performance that this industry for enterprise storage just has never seen before. We are seeing in the real world from customers levels of low latency that are just staggeringly fast compared to anything else that's ever been in the market. So it's delivered on what we expected. We were actually a little unusual in how we announced it because we tend to be very conservative since our customers tend to be some of the largest enterprises in the world. You can't ever afford to get anything wrong. You don't even get 3 strikes, you don't get 1 strike. And so we actually introduced the system as generally available at the end of November. I think it was November 30th, shipped our first customer production level systems in December, but we didn't announce it until June. Usually, I'm sure you probably see in your travels, what's most typical in our industry is when a new product comes out from any company, usually it's generally available at or very close to the announcement date. We literally beat that by over 6 months. We had it in the market. We were able to learn from it. We were able to get customer feedback. And then we realized, yeah, we've really got a winner here. Let's go all out. And that's when we publicly announced it.
Okay, and you've mentioned already that it's the first, I think, InfiniBox 100% solid state solution, which brings those performance advantages you've explained. But perhaps can you, I think you say that it is actually faster than an all-flash array. Yeah. So perhaps can you, without giving away any sort of deep technology secrets, explain how you manage that?
Sure.
And also sort of the other benefits. I mean, you mentioned obviously the performance, the lack of latency is the major one, but are there any other sort of benefits that customers need to be aware of?
Great. The performance, and actually I should almost back up. The reason we chose to call it an SSA, or solid state array, is that the legacy term all flash array came into the market when literally the primary systems that were representing that technology pretty much were all flash, and they were well named and it was an appropriate term. Since we're a caching architecture and DRAM is a key integral component of our systems, and that's where we derive the highest end of performance, DRAM is also a solid state technology, as is flash is a solid state technology. And there are even other interesting solid state technologies on the horizon that are not flash that could become interesting, that we could certainly integrate into an open architecture going forward. So it didn't make sense, we felt, to call it the older term of all flash array, since it really is a much more modern architecture. Solid state was a more appropriate term. And the way you derive that performance is, again, software, intelligently using deep learning to figure out, based upon all the IOs that are taking place in real time, what will likely be the next IOs that are going to be asked for even before they've been asked for. And that's really where we derive the bulk of our performance, is being able to recognize through software, and specifically the only storage product in the world that uses deep learning to do it, how to get software to enable the bringing of data into DRAM, which is an order of magnitude faster than flash or even storage class memory, before it's even been asked for. So if you can maximize your DRAM delivery rather than having to go to the back end, regardless of what the technology is, you're going to outperform any conventional persistent storage in the market. And in fact, that's what we've seen to date. This thing has beaten everything that it's been up against in customer bake-offs with real applications so far. It's delivering.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, because you mentioned you've had it around since sort of last November, but yeah. I guess you've done a lot of beta testing, and then since the launch, customers have been using it in sort of real world example. So what has the, before the launch, if you like, was the feedback helpful to refine the solution? And then since the actual launch, what sort of feedback have you got from customers who, as I say, deploying it in the real world?
Very interesting. Some of the feedback we got initially were some real basic things, like the environment where we see our greatest performance demands tended to be fiber channel. So they said prioritize getting fiber channel out first and then do NAS and NFS later, which we've now done, as well as iSCSI. So the platform supports native iSCSI, it supports native block fiber channel, it supports native NFS file, all of them native inherently. But we had people give us specific priorities like that. So the performance has been phenomenal. I was literally looking at the performance of one of the systems from one of the largest organizations in the world that bought a few of them. They were getting, when I took a look the other day, just for that particular week, they were averaging 110 microseconds of latency. Now, let me put into perspective how insane a number that is. That is faster than the theoretical envelope science experiment hero numbers that is the theoretical potential of some of the other enterprise storage products in the market. And that's what they were seeing running against an Oracle database in real production workloads that were running on their platform. Those are crazy numbers. You should be looking at me like I have lobsters flying out of my ears when I throw a number out like that. And yet that is what they are seeing in the real world on their platform right now.
Okay, and maybe if we can change tack slightly now, a subject that I've sort of come across quite a lot in the last 12, 18 months, AIOps.
Oh, yes.
Infinidat has talked about AIOps and its sort of relevance and the help it provides to, particularly to storage as a service, the flexible consumption model. So I'm interested, if you like, how your use of AIOps is improving the performance of your storage as a service offering, and also how it helps you sort of perform against other, competitive systems that may or may not be using IOPS themselves. Is that something you can give us some background on?
Oh, sure. Yeah, great question. And matter of fact, I almost want to back up a little bit with a little of the history of how did we get into this situation? Because I have to plead guilty to being one of the culprits that created the problems in the market personally. I was part of the very first storage management product ever introduced in the market, which was all the way back in 1995. And we didn't see it coming at the time, but we unleashed a monster. by suddenly providing the ability to start managing things directly on storage, where in the past they used to be done strictly up at the server level by almost everybody. Almost every major storage vendor then started a rush to be able to get tools to manage different things. And they were usually initially proprietary to their own platforms. And there were some attempts to make them more open. And eventually there were all these tools, and new features would layer on top of feature on top of feature. Sometimes they didn't all have the same interfaces. And then a funny thing happened. Capacities started growing so fast that eventually it got to the point where the people with these tools couldn't keep up. And the traditional approach that vendors took to try to solve the problem was, oh, I guess I better make it even easier and simpler to use these tools or to perform these functions easier and simpler. So I'll make a GUI now instead of a command line, or I'll make a pull down menu instead of this. And I'll keep trying to make it easier and easier and easier. Unfortunately, we all realized after we had unleashed this monster that the real solution ultimately, as data continues to grow, has to be, you actually have to take the human element out of it. It's no longer possible for a human to be able to monitor and intelligently decide what they're seeing based upon a lot of data. The data pools just get too big. The time windows are just too small. It has to be done by software. And I have to give credit where credit is due. It was Gartner that introduced the term AIOps to the market back in 2016 for the first time. And I believe, if I can hopefully do justice to their definition, effectively, to me, the essence of AIOps is using intelligent software to do things for you that otherwise would have had to have been done by people, because you just don't have the time and the scope is too large for people to be able to do it. If they had infinite time and infinite resources, they could do a great job, but nobody has infinite time and infinite resources. So the concept of AIOps is using intelligent software to do things for you. Now, we've taken an approach that I think is a little bit unique at Infinidat, and that we see AIOps both inside the storage system as well as outside the storage system. So inside the storage system, what we developed long ago without giving it that term of a name, our neural cache software very much is AIOps. Basically, what if you never had to define RAID groups? What if you never had to define data placement? What if all those things are done for you? What if you never have to worry about identifying hotspots because the system will never allow them to be created in the first place based upon using software to intelligently place data and effectively doing things for you that a person didn't have to? Where it amazes me that still at this point into the market, there are major storage vendors and major products out there where you still have to do these things manually. It's a losing game. The world has moved on. And there are some other vendors that have also taken an approach similar to what we've done in realizing that this is the right way to solve the problem. But we've had an innovative position inside the system now with 10 years of being able to do that. Now, outside the box is where most of the other vendors that are now looking into this space are driven. And we've been there for quite a while, where we've been gathering from the beginning telemetry data from our systems so that we could intelligently try to figure out in building effectively a data lake, analyzing it and saying, wow, based upon what we see here, it looks like you're going to need some more capacity here, or there may be an issue that we want to preemptively get in front of from a maintenance perspective to resolve before a component actually fails, based upon light errors that it's sending back. And those kinds of things enable really sort of three major functions that I've seen in AIOps: preventative maintenance and intelligent preventative maintenance, predictive analytics for capacity planning, and predictive analytics for performance monitoring. So basically, you stay ahead of problems is really the essence of it. You use software to trigger issues that could potentially become an issue before they become an issue, and then you resolve them. Now, the other part we have a product that we've extended from what we used to use internally to analyze those issues that we now make available to customers to enable them to have visibility into the entire fleet of their systems directly. And we call it InfiniVerse. And basically, it's our AIOps overarching software platform. It gets telemetry data off of our systems, and it can be used to give you great insight into capacity, into performance, into stability, reliability, everything that's going on in the system. But here's where I see us differing beyond just being inside the box and outside, where most other people that play in this space, they tend to be just outside the box. They're not doing anything like what we do inside the box. But the other place where we're differentiating is recognizing that the ecosystem of AIOps isn't just storage. And I think storage companies sometimes can get blinders on and think that they are the be all and end all. We realize there are a lot of other organizations that are doing network things and server things and other software things and database things. And so you look for, and virtualization things. And so you look for the best in class partners that you can work with to say, hey, here's my piece of the puzzle. It's really good. But can we work with you cooperatively, because it's our customer? They don't see vendors, they see an IT solution, and they want all the pieces of the puzzle to play nice. So recently we've done announcements of partnerships with companies like Vertana for their virtual wisdom, with ServiceNow for their IT operations management visibility. And you're going to see more of that kind of an approach from us to say, there are people out here that do really cool things well beyond what we do, that see the bigger picture of what's out there. Let's integrate with them. Let's take what we've done from an AIOps perspective, and let's seamlessly integrate it with what they're doing from an AIOps perspective, because ultimately it's the customer's environment that matters. And so you look to what they're looking to deploy and how they want to do it, and how do you solve their problems.
Okay, so I think you've probably answered my next question, which was going to be, is the AIOps solution you're using? I think it was fairly obvious that the one inside the storage is clearly yours, but the one outside is regards to storage, it sounds like. And then, as you say, you link with, I know you've done that recent integration with ServiceNow, for example. Again, with my AIOps hat on, some companies are obviously proposing that they've got one AIOps solution that kind of does everything. But do you think that this approach of storage AIOps linking to network AIOps, maybe DevOps, and all these things, there needs to be a sort of suite of ops, AIOps or otherwise, to get the best possible sort of solution, and openness is important as well?
Yeah, and to that question, yes, it is our software, and it is also someone else's. So it's yes to both questions, really. But I would agree with you. The big picture is, and I think it's the wise organization that always, steps back and views things to the best of their ability from the customer's perspective. What is it they're trying to do and why, and how can you best help them? And no matter how good your piece of the puzzle is, there are always other pieces to that puzzle. There are always multiple links in the chain. And so finding how you can best integrate with them and be the best partner, as well as the best integrated tool. So it means having open APIs. It means having really good open APIs and being able to integrate seamlessly into these other pieces that people might want to deploy. We think that gives you a competitive differentiation for a very simple reason. It helps customers do what they're trying to do better, easier, faster.
And maybe just one more explanation on AIOps. I know the sort of holy grail of that is a sort of self-healing IT infrastructure, which again, a lot of people are maybe a bit nervous. You've explained that automation is replacing people, and there's always that worry that if you just let some automation, it might all go horribly wrong and somebody doesn't realize, or they realize a bit too late in the puzzle. Do you think self-healing IT and storage being a part of that is a realistic end goal, or is there always going to be this balance between automation and real life people sort of keeping one hand on the tiller?
Well, that's actually a really good and particularly insightful question, because no one really knows. However, the key is to try to get there and then see how effective it is. So what do I mean by that? I think the state of AIOps today is mostly what I would call static. The tools are able to identify things, but then ultimately they'll pass it to a human being that says, hey, you probably want to take a look at this. You probably want to go take some action. This is what I see, but you're going to be the one that makes the decision for what action you ultimately take. But I've identified something that you never would have probably been able to figure out unless you had 10,000 years to analyze it. I figured it out instantly, but you still get the responsibility to do it. The end game would ultimately be exactly like you described. Wouldn't it be nice if the system not only identifies the problem, but then actually then takes the action itself to say, aha, I've identified the problem. I think I know how to solve it. I'm going to go ahead and solve it. I think the proof will be and the proof will be in the pudding if software eventually gets to that level. And I believe that's a direction the market certainly wants it to go. But it needs to prove its effectiveness at how it does it. And I'll give you a flagrant example of how these things can go wrong. I don't want to mention them by name or pick on them specifically, but there's an alternative storage product in the market that claims to do intelligent artificial intelligence, even machine learning, for something that, in my opinion, actually creates the possibility of going wrong more than it goes right. And I think any good storage administrator seeing that feature would say to themselves, well, it's there, but do I really want to use it? And do I really want to trust it? And it's things like that that will set us and set the whole industry back. So the key will be if these features add value, and it's a fine line to walk. And the key will be, does it do what it's supposed to do with confidence that people can say, all right, I trust it well enough to run by itself? I don't think the industry's there yet. We'd love to be there. I don't think the industry's there yet.
Okay. And I mean, Infinidat, the discussion I had with your CEO and yourself, clearly you are what I call a very innovative storage organization. You're bringing significant, technology advantages to the market. You're helping keep people sort of simplify IT, but also, improve it significantly. So I guess my question maybe is a bit greedy. Bear in mind, we've talked about a number of innovations today, but are you able to give us a hint of where next you might be going? Is it sort of more of the same, faster and better, or are there sort of different directions you maybe would like to go in, depending on, how the world, which is very difficult to predict, as we all know, evolves over the next 12, 18 months?
Great question. First, there's the easy part. From a technology perspective, when it comes to hardware, since we use nothing but open industry standard commodity hardware, we get to ride the curve of the hottest, latest, coolest stuff that's out there and let the people that build the components compete for what goes into our physical platform. So we see futures potentially for a multitude of technologies. There'll be DRAM, there could be storage class memory, there could be, QLC. Flash is getting interesting now. We need to get some enterprise versions of that in the market. We see PLC on the horizon. We're in the unique position that we can choose whatever makes sense. Hard disks are now getting major advancements as well. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. Whatever makes sense from a reliability, stability, performance, sustainability perspective, we can choose from any of the tools in the toolkit. So that's the easy part. The interesting part, where the battleground will be in the future, is software. And that's where feature and function that deliver customer value come into play. So what are the things customers are going to care about going forward that's changed? From a performance perspective, and one of the reasons also why we're excited coming full circle with InfiniBox SSA, is that the three attributes of performance, IOs per second, bandwidth, latency, they're all separate animals, and yet vendors all too often lump them together as if they were one single thing. Some things care about IOs per second, things like a cellular billing application. There's not a lot of data in an individual cellular phone transaction, but there's sure a large number of them that you have to be able to track and manage. Video streaming is the exact extreme other opposite. It's probably maybe a single file you might be watching for a movie, but that file could be really large, and streaming it, your bandwidth is what really matters. But latency is where the real issue is for the future for most organizations, because of how public their web presences are these days and how much gets done on the web. I would submit that the vast majority of solutions in the market from almost every major enterprise vendor today can probably meet the requirements for most vendors for IOs per second and bandwidth almost all the time for almost all applications. But latency, ever unachievable zero latency, things happen instantaneously all the time. That's the end goal, and that's where the battleground will be on performance. So technologies of software, like caching and like what we do with InfiniBox and InfiniBox SSA, that's how you differentiate yourself and where the world has moved to for performance. Availability is going to be another one. I believe that going forward, and we believe at Infinidat, that customers, and we see it with the kind of customers we deal with every day, they will not tolerate anything less than 100% continuous availability all the time for everything. That not only means things as components might fail, because hardware can always fail here or there, or a bug can exist in software. Not only can you not allow those things to take you down, But you can't ever take systems down for upgrades. You can't take things down for migrations to new levels of technology. You've got to stay 100.0.0 all the time. 10 years ago, people used to proudly talk about 5 nines of availability. Some vendors even still proudly talk of 6 nines of availability. It's not good enough. It's not good enough anymore. It's got to be 100%. And there are ways to leverage technology to go that way. I mean, even simple things that we've done. I'm amazed that we're still the only technology in the market that uses triple components for all the mission critical components on the platform. Active, active, active. It was the godfather of computer science, John von Neumann, decades ago, that theorized that the way you get the ultimate in availability and integrity of information in an IT system, in any computer system and architecture, is do things in threes. Not twos, not fours. There are reasons he mathematically theorized why that made sense. We're the only platform in the market that does that. Plus, we've eliminated, back to the point of AIOps, a lot of the touches on a platform. Human error is still the biggest single reason that things fail. And usually it's during times of change or configuration modification or upgrades or things like that. So eliminating the amount of touches that need to take place from a human being on the platform, which we've done, these are all factors that contribute to higher availability. So 100% availability, it's got to be an absolute mandatory issue. And going hand in hand with it, no surprise to certainly you or anyone else, the volumes of capacity that people are going to need are never going to go backwards. They're only going to go up, and they're going up exponentially. So today, when we talk at the high end about things like petabytes, the word exabyte is going to be in all of our vocabularies over the next couple of words, and then beyond to zettabytes and whatever. The volumes must be dealt with, and you must have technologies that lend themselves to it. This is why we did things like create a TRIE infrastructure, TRIE, for how we access things on our system, instead of the older, more legacy, less scalable tools in the toolkit from a computer science perspective, which were either binary trees or B trees or hashing algorithms. They served us well in the days of kilobytes and gigabytes and even up to terabytes and maybe even single-digit petabytes, but they won't serve us well in the exabyte world. We're the only platform in the market that uses a TRIE like the hyperscalers already figured out in their search engines years ago. At the scale they dealt with, nothing but a TRIE was going to work. We took note of that and we learned from it. And so we're also the only platform in the market that uses one, which gives us the ability to go to hyperscale in ways that no one else is going to be able to. So we see those things being important. How do you address performance and how do you address availability at hyperscale? And then the last piece, bringing it full circle to the AIOps discussion, is it's got to be incredibly simple. It's got to be driven by software. You've got to make it for the people that are still going to be managing the functions and having responsibility for the operation of systems. You've got to make their lives unbelievably easy by unburdening the mundane and letting them do the difficult stuff that still only people and intelligent people will be able to do. That's what it's all about.
Okay, and I think in your answer there, particularly talking about latency, you may have been hinting at edge type applications that are potentially going to grow in importance. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that market and where Infinidat can help? And also, if it's not unfair, because I know we've covered a lot of ground, I'll take a lot of your time. Sustainability is the one other issue that perhaps is increasing in importance. We got COP26 round the corner, etc. Just any thoughts as to what the role of IT companies generally and Infinidat maybe itself has in contributing towards that sustainability goal?
Gotcha. Sustainability is on everybody's mind, and so that's something I think just generally any good organization always has sustainability in at the forefront of what they do as a good corporate citizen. Relative to edge versus core and other these debates have gone on forever, and the key becomes, if you're getting value, regardless of where you get it, it makes sense. So I tend to stay out of those philosophical discussions because I have seen examples of organizations that have taken over the years that have taken diametrically philosophically different approaches to how to solve a problem, and yet both were successful. And similarly, I've seen people take those exact same approaches and fail. So I'm of the belief that it's less about the theoretical architecture than it is about the actual implementation and the intelligence of the solution and the people doing it. I think that's ultimately what makes you successful. Smart people do smart things. Bad solutions do bad things.
That's potentially a good place to finish, but I'd like to offer you, I don't know if you have any one or two final thoughts, or as I say, if that sort of the smart versus bad is a good place to finish there.
Well, I would say the last one being along those lines of, the latency mattering, the availability mattering, the hyperscale mattering, the ease of use mattering. There's the last one we actually haven't hit to, and I'll leave it as the ultimate one, which is you have to be able to do this stuff at a lower cost than other people if you want to be attractive as well. And that's been one of our hallmarks. And usually a lot of our customers are shocked when they see, wait a minute, you've outperformed everything we've had, you're higher availability, you're easier to use, and you're much less expensive. We never can need to forget that part either, that ultimately money comes into the equation, and it's not just about having cool technology, it's about being able to afford it and being able to give greater return to your organization in terms of ROI. Okay, well, Ken, I really appreciate your time. We covered a lot of ground. It's been great to chat. So thank you very much indeed. Pleasure's mine, Phil. I thank you for taking the time today, really much. Thanks again. Take care.